Hey everyone, are you ready for another deep dive? Today we're going way back in time to uncover the truth about a creature that's truly the stuff of legends. The Titanoboa, it's a giant snake so massive it makes an anaconda look like, well, a little worm.
Yeah, we're talking seriously big snake here.
And the really fascinating part is how this prehistoric giant connects to the challenges our planet faces today. But before we jump into the age of the Titanoboa, we're going to start with a paleontology puzzle that had scientists scratching their heads back in the early 1900s. Picture this, you're digging, right? And you unearth these incredibly detailed but completely crushed turtle fossils. Not just any turtle, though. We're talking giant car-sized shells.
Wow, that's a big turtle. What could do that?
Exactly, that was the question. The sheer size of these fossils had some folks convinced that giant creatures roamed the Earth back then. Can you imagine something massive enough to crush a turtle shell like that?
I mean, it's got to be huge.
And that's where our story takes a turn for the adventurous. Enter Percy Fawcett, an explorer with a flair for the dramatic. Fawcett was convinced that a 65-foot prehistoric python was responsible for those crushed turtle fossils.
65 feet. Now that's a snake and a half.
You know it. And if that wasn't enough, he also claimed this megaserpent guarded a lost city of gold.
Okay, now that's a story.
Oh, it's a story for the ages. And get this, people all over the world were captivated by it. Even the Guangxu Emperor of China was reported so intrigued, he offered a huge reward for capturing one of these monstrous pythons.
You've got to admit, a giant snake guarding a lost city of gold that's hard to resist. But from a scientific perspective, a 65-foot python, well, let's just say it pushes the boundaries of what we understand about biology. Turns out, Fawcett's giant python was more fiction than fact, but his obsession with huge snakes, it kind of foreshadowed an even more incredible discovery.
A discovery that would completely rewrite everything we thought we knew about prehistoric life. A discovery that would introduce the world to the Titanoboa. Forget 65 feet, because the Titanoboa blew that number out of the water.
We're talking a snake that stretched a mind-boggling 48 feet long and weighed about as much as a small car.
It's almost impossible to imagine.
It really is. This was the largest snake to ever slither across the planet.
And it ruled a world much different than ours, right?
Right. About 55 million years ago, South America was one giant, steamy, swampy jungle. And this was the Titanoboa's domain.
And what a scary thought, being stuck in those swamps with this mega predator on the loose.
Yeah, forget about worrying about an alligator biting your ankle. The Titanoboa could gulp down a 6-foot crocodile without breaking a sweat.
Okay, wait, hold on, 6 feet. It could swallow a crocodile that big in one go.
One gulp, gone.
What kind of power are we talking about here?
Well, constricting is the name of the game, and the Titanoboa was the undisputed champ. Imagine for a second the weight of a couple of cars crushing down on you. That's the kind of force the snake was packing.
That's insane. No wonder those turtle shells were crushed.
Yeah, and the most telling clue about the Titanoboa's world is that its fossils were found alongside the remains of those giant turtles and crocodiles.
So it wasn't just the biggest snake around. It shared its home with other massive reptiles.
Exactly. And that tells us a lot about the ecosystem back then.
It's mind-blowing to think that we went from speculating about giant pythons to discovering this absolute monster of a snake, a creature we never even knew existed. It just makes you wonder what else is out there, buried beneath our feet, waiting to be uncovered.
And it makes you question everything you thought you knew about the history of life on Earth. I mean, if something as massive as the Titanoboa could remain hidden for millions of years, what else is there to discover? It really puts our understanding of the past into perspective.
It really does. But the story of the Titanoboa isn't just about its incredible size. It's also about the world it lived in, a world that was much hotter than our own. And believe it or not, there are some eerie parallels between that ancient world and the challenges our planet faces today. You know, it's amazing to think that long before we unearthed the Titanoboa's fossils, we were already imagining giant snakes.
Right. They slither through our myths and legends.
Totally. It's like they're hardwired into our imaginations. You see these colossal snakes in cultures all over the world.
Powerful beings, gods, royalty, even shapeshifters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if maybe, just maybe, those ancient stories were inspired by, actual encounters with these massive creatures.
Huh.
Or if there's something about snakes, something in their nature that just sparks this awe and fear in us.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
But here's what I find really interesting. The way we view snakes, it's changed over time, hasn't it? I mean, they were these symbols of power, divinity even. And now, well, They're often seen as villains.
Yeah, you're right. Like the serpent in the Garden of Eden, for example, or
Yeah,
Medusa.
exactly. It's almost like as snakes got smaller in size, they also lost their place of respect in our stories.
Hmm. It's a really interesting thought. I wonder if it's because, as we learn more about them, they became less mysterious, less godlike. Or if it's simply because their smaller size made them seem more like an everyday threat rather than this awesome, powerful being.
Yeah, it's a good question. But even with all we've learned, snakes still hold on to a certain mystique, don't they?
Absolutely. Even with all our fancy technology, we still haven't completely cracked the code of their origins. How did they lose their limbs? Where do they fit in the grand scheme of evolution? We're still trying to figure it all out.
It just shows you how much we still have to learn about the natural world. And speaking of mysteries, we can't forget about the time period when the Titanoboa was king. The Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or, as the scientists like to call it, the PTM.
Ah, the PTM. Global temperatures went through the roof. It was a time when even the poles were covered in
The
rainforest.
rainforest at the poles, you're kidding.
Nope, that's how hot it was.
So what happened? What caused this extreme heat wave?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We know that a massive amount of carbon was released into the atmosphere, very similar to what we're doing today, but the exact trigger is still up for debate.
It's a little unsettling when you think about it, isn't it? I mean, we're releasing carbon into the atmosphere at an alarming rate. Are we recreating the conditions that allowed giant snakes to thrive millions of years ago?
It's a question we should definitely be thinking about. The Earth's climate has always gone through these dramatic shifts. That's part of what makes the story of life on Earth so fascinating. The story of the Titanoboa and the PTM is a great example. It's a reminder that our planet is capable of some pretty incredible and sometimes terrifying things.
So where did that leave us? Well, I think the most important takeaway here is that by learning about these ancient creatures, about the world they lived in, we gain a better understanding not just of our planet's past, but of its possible future. And who knows, maybe even a few hints about ourselves. Will giant snakes make a comeback? I guess only time will tell. But one thing is certain, the story of the Titanoboa is a potent reminder that the natural world is full of surprises. So keep exploring, keep asking questions. Until next time, keep diving deep.